Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for...
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Plenty of things to discuss today. The Indiana Fever take on the Connecticut Sun tonight. Game 2 of their WNBA playoff series. A game is happening at 7:30 on ESPN. NIL dramas going on. Tony East joining me at 11 o'clock to talk about that Fever series. Anthony Richardson playing against the best defense in the NFL on Sunday. Going to talk about that. Just so many different topics. And I want to start with the Indiana Fever playing against the Connecticut Sun tonight at 7:30. I am so tired and worn out by all of this Caitlin Clark stuff. And it's not even her per se. It is more about the way that the WNBA has been covered all year and the way that Caitlin Clark has been covered and talked about all year long. And I know that there are people that love her. Her game on Sunday going up against the NFL drew over 1 million viewers, which is incredibly impressive. People still love her. This Caitlin Clark effect is still happening. She is undoubtedly still a rock star, but I cannot bear to go through any more of this WNBA drama. I am so sick and tired of it. And because I knew that the Indiana Fever were going to play basketball tonight, I sat down last night, popped the laptop, was doing my prep, trying to, put together a good show for you today. And so I'm looking for audio. I'm like, I like playing, different people talking about whatever's going on. But I could only find audio about one thing when it came to the Indiana Fever and when it came to Caitlin Clark. Even though it happened 3 days ago, all the audio that I found was about Caitlin Clark getting hit in the eye during game 1 by Dejanay Carrington. Dejanay Carrington was asked about hitting her in the eye yesterday, and here's what she had to say.
Dejanay, did you, when you went and kind of swatted at Caitlin, did you intend to hit her in the eye? And if so, could you just, or if not, either way, could you talk about what happened on that play?
I don't even know why I would intend to hit anybody in the eye. That doesn't even make sense to me. But no, I didn't. I didn't know I hit her, actually. I was trying to make a play on the ball, and I guess I followed through and I hit her. So obviously it's never intentional. That's not even like the type of player that I am. So yeah.
Did you and Marina kind of laugh about it afterwards? It looked like there was later on in the game they caught you guys laughing about it.
No, I just told you I didn't even know I hit her. So I can't laugh about something I didn't know happened.
That was Connecticut Sun guard Dejanay Carrington, who hit Caitlin Clark in the face inadvertently during game 1. And it has been the only thing I've heard about this series. Later, as I continued to do my prep and I continued to look for audio about anything other than that incident, I found more audio, people asking Caitlin Clark once again about being hit in the eye, even though she was asked immediately after the game on Sunday about it. And she dismissed it. She said it didn't matter. She said she didn't think it was on purpose. She said that she didn't feel like it impacted her play at all. I am so tired of all the drama. My issue with all this Caitlin Clark and WNBA coverage is that it's not about the sport, and it hasn't been all year. It's about the drama, people trying to use Caitlin Clark, in kind of these different political landscapes, and it's annoying, and it's no fun to talk about. I love talking about sports. I love coming on the air and saying whatever. I love coming on the air and saying that the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to win the AFC South, even though they started 0-3. Okay, it creates fun discourse about the actual sports of football. I love coming on the air and saying that the 49ers are going to miss the playoffs because of injuries. I love saying stuff like that because then a conversation ensues about why I think that and why you think the opposite or why you agree with me. I like coming on the air and talking about how IU basketball isn't what it was and how NIL is ruining college sports, which I'm going to get to here momentarily. That is sports talk. Talking about whether or not Dejanay Carrington intentionally hit Caitlin Clark in the eye 3 days ago after, they've both already been asked about it repeatedly, isn't. None of the coverage for the Sun and Indiana Fever series has been about the series. I haven't seen a clip, haven't heard a question about, hey, Christy Sides, hey, Caitlin Clark, hey, Kelsey Mitchell, what adjustments are you going to make heading into game 2 to get Caitlin Clark going? Hey, Connecticut Sun, what did you guys do so well in game 1 to keep, Caitlin Clark from going crazy? Haven't heard anything like that. That hasn't been the conversation around this series one bit. There hasn't been a conversation about the WNBA like that all year. And when sports become about something other than the sport, it turns people off. It does. When the NBA, whether they were right or not, and they decided to put, BLM on the court, it turned people off. Because this sport of basketball that a lot of people love and enjoy watching became about something other than the sport, and it pushed people away from it. And when that happens, people tend to not enjoy it as much, and that is very much where I have fallen. I am so ready for all this Caitlin Clark stuff to pass to where the coverage on the WNBA and Caitlin Clark as well can actually be about her basketball ability and not the drama that is going on around her that she clearly doesn't want any part of. And when it becomes that, when the WNBA becomes about the actual basketball, I'll buy a ton of stock because some of those women can really play. As of right now, though, it isn't, and I'm so done with it. I'm excited to have Tony East on at 11 because he does a great job covering the Fever. I'm going to ask him if he feels the same way about how the series and how really Caitlin Clark the entire year has been covered. But when sports become about something outside of the sport itself, it just makes it less enjoyable. And NIL is currently doing that to college sports. My brother and I, we are wanting to watch the Arkansas Razorbacks play football in every SEC stadium. Grew up an Arkansas fan, lived in Arkansas for over a decade. I was born there. My dad was born and raised there. My mom lived there for quite some time as well. Okay, so I love the Arkansas Razorbacks. And so because of that, and just SEC football in general, my brother and I, we're slowly, very slowly, because we're young and broke, so it's a pretty slow grind right now. We're slowly working our way to going to all these different SEC stadiums. So we've been to 2 games so far. We went to Tuscaloosa, right, to watch Arkansas play Alabama in November of 2021. And then this previous Saturday, we went to Auburn to watch Arkansas play Auburn. We had a blast at both. Had an absolutely outstanding time. Long car rides, long conversations, catching up just on everything that's going on. But at the game itself, at the Auburn game on Saturday, I couldn't help but notice one glaring difference between our 2 experiences, one being at Auburn and one being at Alabama. And this glaring difference made the Alabama visit so much more enjoyable. NIL became a thing in June of 2021. Caleb and I went to the Alabama game in November of 2021. NIL then was still, a little baby. No one really knew what it was. Okay, in November 2021, people were still naive enough to think that this wouldn't turn into pay-to-play like it is right now. And at the Alabama game, we're sitting down. We're in a sea of crimson. Okay, season ticket holders around us talking about Alabama. And the discussion was about the stories of the players. Okay, they discussed, hey, this guy went to high school 30 minutes from here, right? And he came in as a freshman, and he barely played. We thought that he might transfer and sit out a year because that was still a thing. But no, instead, he decided to stay. Nick Saban helped him develop, and now he's this awesome player, and he's going to be, a second-round pick in the upcoming NFL draft. That was the conversation when we were in Tuscaloosa in 2020-21. Then Saturday, we go to Auburn. Didn't hear any of that at the Auburn game. None of it whatsoever. All of the conversations around me, all of the comments around me were about NIL. It was about how they paid this player this much money to transfer in, and why would they do that? Because he just dropped that pass. And it was all about that. It was all about figuring out whether or not this receiver or corner or offensive lineman or defensive lineman or quarterback that transferred in was worth the money that they were being paid. And NIL is in the process of ruining college sports, because one of the best things about college sports is development stories and seeing guys get better over time. As I sat in the crowd at Auburn on Saturday and I listened to the fans around me, none of the comments, none of the complaints were about the actual game. It was all about the NIL. I heard things said like, why are we paying that receiver $100,000 to drop that pass? Why am I giving to the collective if this is the product that we're going to put on the field? I heard Dan Dockich, who shows on this station from noon to 3 every day. You can listen on the Indy Sports Ticket app. I heard him on this show yesterday asking people the simple question of, why do you give to Indiana's collective for their basketball team to not make the tournament? And it is a great question. NIL is slowly lessening the sport. It's becoming less and less about the coaches and the players and developing guys, and it's becoming more and more about how rich is your alumni base. And that simply shouldn't be the case. Successful college teams in any sport, football, basketball, baseball, badminton, bowling, whatever. Successful college teams in any sport should be successful because they recruited and coached better. And that is no longer the case. Now, successful college teams are the ones with the deepest pockets. Okay? And it has taken some of the joy out of college sports. Non-Power 4 schools have become glorified JUCOs. That's really what they've become. If Ball State finds a great player at Center Grove, right, and they bring him in and he's like a 2-star recruit and they invest in him and they develop him and they turn him into a good player, guess what happens? Some bigger, richer school swoops in and takes the player simply because they have more money. I have sat back and watched the drama of the WNBA ruin the joy of watching the game. And I feel like I'm slowly witnessing this. I'm slowly witnessing the same thing with NIL. Do the same thing to college sports. And then I wake up this morning, and the first thing I always do is check Twitter, because stuff happens at 3 a.m. and I'm not awake at that time. And I stumble upon, not really, it was in my face immediately, this Matthew Sluka story. This guy, starting quarterback at UNLV, who has given himself a red shirt and is going to transfer out of UNLV because of some NIL disputes. And the original report, and it wasn't even a report, it's what Matthew Sluka said. He said that he wasn't being given everything he was promised at UNLV. Here's the thing about UNLV. Barry Odom is the head football coach. He was previously the defensive coordinator at the University of Arkansas. I know people that know Barry Odom. And everything that I know about Barry Odom, everything that I've been told, everything that I've heard, is that Barry Odom is a stand-up guy. He's a nice guy. Okay, he's a guy that Chris Ballard would love to hire because he's nice and he's loyal and he follows through on his word and he does things, quote unquote, the right way. So when Matthew Sluka came out and basically accused UNLV of not following through on their NIL money, I knew something was up. And sure enough, as the story continued to develop, more rumors, different reports have come out about why he's actually redshirting and looking to transfer. There are 3 rumors. Another school offered him more money, which is very possible because even though teams aren't supposed to tamper, it happens all the time. And if this is the case, then whatever school he transfers to should be punished pretty severely because you aren't supposed to be able to tamper and it continues to happen. But hey, whatever. The second rumor, the second report is that he walked into Barry Odom's office, demanded more NIL money. Barry Odom didn't have it. He was like, no. Okay, we told you we were going to pay you this much. We did. Sorry. You have to honor that. And he was like, no, I don't. I'm going to redshirt and transfer. That honestly seems like the most likely thing going on here. And then the third option is that Sluka is telling the truth and someone isn't paying what was promised, which I have a hard time believing that a Barry Odom-led program would happen. But here's the truth. No matter which of these things is true, it tells you a lot about where not only college football is right now, but college sports in general. College sports used to be about the university. It used to be about the team. And it's awesome. It really is, because I sit back and I think part of why people don't like the NFL or the NBA is there's a lot of drama around money, right? Brandon Ayuk, holding in, not practicing because he wants a bigger deal. Trent Williams doing the exact same thing. Jamar Chase did that with the Bengals. T. Higgins threatened to do it. CeeDee Lamb did it in Dallas. And people just don't like dealing with that. They don't like reading about that and having to put up with that. Okay? And this is what we're starting to see in college sports. The beauty of college sports for the longest time was it was more about the name on the front than it was about the name on the back. And we live in a society that is incredibly selfish. And college sports wasn't like that. It was about the university and the name on the front. And with the introduction of NIL, that is no longer the case. Everyone is out for themselves. There are parents and adults getting involved, because I guarantee you that Matthew Sluka, quarterback at UNLV, didn't come to this conclusion on his own. His parents got involved, an agent got involved, and he asked for more money. Or another school got involved and tried to lure him away. No matter which is true, NIL is clearly a problem in college sports. And so, and everyone knows it. I think that's the most frustrating part about this. I don't think there's anyone out there that's like, yeah, NIL is perfect. No, everyone realizes that there are major, major issues. There needs to be some sort of salary cap. I'm not throwing out any idea that you probably haven't heard yet. But it's an issue, and it needs to be fixed. And here's my final issue with this Matthew Sluka transferring out of UNLV story. He's not very good. They're 3-0, yeah, but he's only thrown for like 380 yards on the year. He's only completing 44% of his passes, and this guy wants more money? What? That is absurd. Even if UNLV, I'm making these numbers up here. Let's say UNLV was like, hey, if you come play here, we'll give you $500,000, right? And he showed up and they only gave him, $400,000. I don't know. I don't feel like completing 44% of your passes and not even averaging 200 passing yards a game is necessarily worth $500,000. And yet here he is, either leaving a school for potentially more money or going into Barry Odom's office, head coach at UNLV, and demanding more and him saying no. It is ridiculous. And NIL is slowly in the process of ruining college sports. The Colts, on the other hand, their season's not ruined quite yet. 1-2. There's been some positives. There's been some negatives, but they got a tough game on Sunday against the best defense in the NFL. A young quarterback against the best defense in the NFL is never fun. I've got some thoughts on Anthony Richardson and what is going to happen on Sunday when he faces off against the Steelers when we come back here in 4 minutes.
Often imitated, never duplicated. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Tickets, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in. No matter how you're tuning in, greatly appreciate it. If you didn't know, we're putting on an event called Bourbon and Birdies. Get your tickets. I'm sure you can find them at indysportsticket.com. Hit some golf balls, drink some good bourbon. It'll be a blast. Anthony, speaking of a blast, Anthony Richardson playing against the Steelers on Sunday. I got to be honest, I don't think this is going to be a blast. This is going to be ugly. This is going to be a rough game. This will likely be the worst game we see from Anthony Richardson as the Colts starting quarterback this season. I grew up a Miami Dolphins fan. Okay. Whenever they would draft a new quarterback, there were always 2 games on the schedule. I was like, I will not watch these because I know I'll go crazy if I do. And it was the 2 games against the Patriots because Bill Belichick ate rookie quarterbacks alive. He just did. That's what he did to every rookie quarterback that ever happened. Okay? He would just, throw a whole bunch of crap at him, and it was rough. And that's how I feel about this game. The Steelers defense is going to eat Anthony Richardson alive. And that's not an indictment on Anthony Richardson. Okay? It's a compliment to this Pittsburgh Steelers defense because this Pittsburgh Steelers defense has eaten everyone alive. They haven't given up more than 10 points in a game through 3 games. They held Kirk Cousins, a guy who's been in the NFL for a long time and who has had success, to under 200 yards passing, and he threw 2 interceptions. Justin Herbert, one of the more talented quarterbacks in the NFL, a guy who put together the single best rookie season we've ever seen from a quarterback. That guy, they held him to under 200 yards passing as well. When they faced rookie Bo Nix in week 2 in the Denver Broncos, they scored 6 points. They held a Sean Payton offense. I don't care who's playing quarterback. Sean Payton usually figures out ways to put the ball in the end zone. They held that guy in that offense to 6 points, and Bo Nix threw 2 interceptions. I'm just telling you all this to prepare you for what we're going to see on Sunday. Anthony Richardson is going to struggle mightily. He's going to turn the ball over. He's probably only going to complete like 50% of his passes, but that's not new. He's done that every game he's played. There likely won't be as many big explosive plays down the field with Minkah Fitzpatrick, one of the best safeties in the NFL, playing safety on the back end. There is an interesting aspect of this game, though, that I am intrigued to see how Anthony Richardson handles. Okay, because even though I think this game is going to be rough from Anthony, there is something that hasn't happened to him yet that will happen on Sunday. He hasn't had to deal with a ton of pressure. This offensive line has done a great job, not a good job, a great job of keeping him clean in these first 3 games. He's only been sacked 4 times in the first 3 games. But here's the truth of the matter. As good as this Indianapolis Colts offensive line is, they're going to have their hands full this week. Because once again, this Pittsburgh Steelers defense is the best in the NFL. And the best player on this Steelers defense is probably the best pass rusher in the league, TJ Watt. He has 3 sacks on the year already. The Steelers are averaging 3 sacks a game. They are going to get home this week, even though this Colts offensive line is good. And I'm interested to see how Anthony Richardson responds to that. How does he deal with being under pressure? Okay, and I'm kind of excited because I think we're going to see an aspect of his game that we haven't seen a ton of yet this year. He likes to be in the pocket. I feel like there is this commitment from him to not run the ball unless he absolutely has to. He wants to stand in the pocket. He wants to prove that he can stand in the pocket and deliver the ball on time and on target, which is great. That is an important aspect of his development. But I don't think that the Steelers are going to let him do that this week. They're going to make him move around, which I'm hoping, I'm genuinely hoping that this leads to more Anthony Richardson scrambles during the game. Because he's a player, look, we all know. Okay, 6'3" or whatever, 6'4", 250 pounds, runs a 4.5 or a 4.4 or whatever it is. And he's the type of guy with that size and that speed and that athleticism that if he gets loose on some scrambles, he can wreak some havoc. Okay, big Anthony Richardson scrambles, right, where it's 3rd and 8 and he runs for 12 yards. Or it's, 2nd and 7 and he runs for 30. That is undoubtedly something that I'm going to be looking for this week because, look, the Colts are going to struggle to throw the football. They just are. Okay, I'm fully prepared for what the Steelers are going to do. They're going to load the box. They're going to say, Jonathan Taylor, best player on the offense. Let's make this young quarterback who struggled with accuracy, let's make him beat us with his arm. And so they're going to stack the box, and they're going to challenge Anthony Richardson to complete passes to these receivers. So his ability to run the ball is going to come into play because receivers aren't going to get open on every play, right? So I think that the Colts are going to need these scrambles from him to move the football efficiently because throwing the football is not going to be the easiest thing in the world. And because of that, I think it's highly, highly likely that the Colts are going to drop to 1-3 on the season. And even though they're going to be 1-3, I'm still going to have questions about whether or not this team is actually bad. Because I'm in the process of still trying to figure out whether or not they're good, right? And there are things that tell me that this Colts team is bad. The loss to Malik Willis and the Packers tells me that they're bad. Anthony Richardson's struggles don't exactly instill confidence in me that they're good enough offensively to score a bunch of points. The run defense, although it was better against the Bears, was terrible in the first 2 games. Okay, they're second to last in rushing yards allowed per game. Pass defense has been good, but we all know that there's personnel issues on the back end of this defense. Really, the only things that instill any sort of confidence that I have in this Colts team is the pass rush. That's been very consistent in these first 3 games. And the offensive line. Those feel like the only bright spots for the Colts through 3 games. But the truth of the matter is, through 3 games, they've scored more points than anyone else in the AFC South. And they've allowed the least amount of points than anyone else in the AFC South. The Colts just have to figure out a way to put it all together. If they can do both at the same time, then I feel like they'll be pretty good. They lose game 1 to the Houston Texans because the defense didn't show up. They lose 29-27. Everyone's excited about Anthony Richardson because he's making all these big plays, right? And then game 2 happens, and they lose to the Packers because the offense didn't show up. Did the defense give up 1 million rushing yards? Yes, but they only gave up 16 points. And that, usually I would expect for a Shane Steichen offense to score more than 16 points in a game. And then week 3, Sunday, they beat the Bears because both sides of the football showed up. The defense played incredibly well, right? Only giving up 2.3 yards per carry. I know they gave up a bunch of passing yards, but, when the opposing team throws the ball 52 times, you're going to give up some passing yards, right? And then the offense eventually got rolling on the ground as they scored 21 points. They won ugly on Sunday against the Bears. And that seems like that's going to be the formula again on Sunday against the Steelers, which I kind of like because I think it's hard to not win ugly when you have a quarterback like Anthony Richardson who's, just not super efficient in the passing game. But the issue is the Steelers want to win ugly as well because they don't exactly have a ton of confidence in Justin Fields. Right? This is going to be a physical, run-heavy football game from both teams. This game may be over in 2.5 hours because both of these teams are just going to line up and run the crap out of the ball. For the Colts, it's going to be another Jonathan Taylor heavy game. Okay, I think that they're going to do what they can to avoid having Anthony Richardson drop back and throw the football 35 times. Because if that happens, then Colts aren't beating anybody if they're asking Anthony Richardson to throw the football 35 times. I think they're going to try to lean on this Colts defense as well because, look, say what you want about Justin Fields. I know there's people that like him. I know there's people that have questions. I'm one of the people that have questions. When you look at his career, though, it hasn't exactly been an illustrious one. And I think the Colts are going to look to try to win this game 20-13. Like, that is a realistic outcome for the Colts on Sunday if they were to win, right? It's also a very realistic outcome for them to lose 20-13. I think that that's what we're looking at. But when I look at the Steelers, there is no denying that defense is incredible. I said it yesterday. They have the single best unit in the NFL. Like, the Steelers defense is the single best unit. Like, the Steelers defense is better than the Bills offense. The Steelers defense is better than the Chiefs offense. Like, it's outstanding. But the Steelers offense isn't that good. No way around it. They only average 17 points per game. That is 24th in the NFL. They average less than 300 yards of total offense a game. That is also 24th in the NFL. They only average 4.6 yards per play. That's 28th in the NFL. So that tells me that they don't move the ball consistently and they don't create big plays. Their red zone touchdown percentage is only 25%. That is 31st in the NFL. So if they make it in the red zone, if they even get there, they aren't scoring touchdowns. They're kicking field goals. Okay, this is a bad offensive team coming here to Lucas Oil Stadium from Pittsburgh. This is a game that the Colts defense should have some success in. The Steelers want to win off of their defense, right? They want to play good defense, hold teams to like 13 points, and hope that they can find a way to score 14. Okay? The Colts have a legitimate shot to win Sunday if they can find a way to keep the turnovers to a minimum, which is going to be hard to do with Anthony Richardson, and if they can figure out a way to run the football, which will also be difficult because the Steelers are holding their opponents to 73 rushing yards a game, which is second best in the NFL. Run the football, don't turn it over, trust the defense, and trust that Justin Fields isn't going to beat you, because I don't think he will. If they can do those things, then the Colts will look up. They'll be 2-2, and Colts fans will feel a lot better about the rest of the year, because 2-2 sounds way better than 1-3. Even though if the Colts start 1-3, they can still make the playoffs because the schedule isn't that gruesome and their division is terrible. Okay, the AFC South is worse than the NFC South, legitimately. So this is a very winnable game for the Colts on Sunday. Hopefully they can figure out a way to pull it out, lean on Jonathan Taylor, lean on the defense, and that way they can improve to 2-2. That way we all feel much better about the future of the season. You know what's surprising? I think I'm looking forward to the Indiana football game on Saturday more than I'm looking forward to the Colts game on Sunday. And I'm very curious to know how good is this IU team? I think they're pretty good. And how good do they have to be for IU fans to genuinely care about the football season? I'm going to answer those questions when we come back here in 4 minutes.
Welcome back to The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hope you guys are having a nice Wednesday, a nice little hump day. NIL rearing its ugly head this morning. Guys are transferring from UNLV, and people are freaking out. Oh, NIL. Oh, man. You know who doesn't have an NIL problem right now? The Indiana Hoosiers football team. They're legitimately good. Like, they're a really good football team. They're fun to watch. I said it before I went to break in the previous segment that I'm more excited to watch Indiana play football on Saturday than I am to watch the Colts on Sunday because they are a legitimately good football team. And I'm just so intrigued to see the crowd on Saturday. They're playing at noon, conference game against Maryland. They're 4-0. Kurt Cignetti, first coach in the history of IU to start 4-0. Like, are people bought into this? I'm genuinely curious. If you want to tweet at us at Ticket1430, or you want to tweet at me specifically at __ Jonathan Smith on Twitter, like, that would be great. Like, are you invested in this? Or does IU football have to do more? Do they have to win this week? Should I expect for Memorial Stadium to be sold out on Saturday at noon when Maryland comes to town? I feel like it should be. But then again, I love college football so much. Grew up in the South. It's near and dear to my heart. Okay? But I don't know enough about the history of IU football, and I don't know enough about Indiana's love for college football enough to know if it will be or not. But what I do know is that it should be sold out because this IU football team is legitimately good. I know they haven't played any outstanding teams yet, but they've blown everybody out. They have scored more points than any other team in the Big Ten Conference this year. They've scored 202 points in 4 games. The next closest team is Ohio State at 157 points on the season. Only one team in the Big Ten, Ohio State, has allowed fewer points than IU. They appear to be a complete football team. I don't know how good they are because, once again, they haven't played anybody, super tough. Their toughest opponent has been UCLA, who isn't very good. UCLA's football program is most famous right now for their, coach standing up at Big Ten media days and saying, "We're UCLA. We're located in Los Angeles." That's what UCLA football is most famous for right now, and that's the best team that Indiana has played. Right, so it's hard to know exactly how good they are, but I don't think that they're as good as the upper echelon of the Big Ten. Okay, like if they played Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, Penn State, or USC, like I would pick Indiana to lose. I would. But outside of that, I think that they can beat anybody else in the Big Ten. With what we've seen from them so far, and once again, what is a small sample size, 4 games against 4 not very good teams, they appear to belong kind of in that second tier. Right, they belong, in the same tier as Illinois, who had a big win on the road at Nebraska last week on Friday night. They belong in the same tier as Nebraska. Matt Rule is in the process of turning that program around. They belong in the same tier as Iowa, who's better this year than they were last year because they can actually score some points, and that defense continues to be nasty. That is where they belong, and I'm excited to watch them play. I'm more excited to watch Indiana play football on Saturday than I was for any IU basketball game this season. Because I knew what I was getting with Indiana basketball all year long. A bunch of guys who couldn't shoot, a bunch of guys with broken jump shots. You knew that the games were going to be ugly if they were going to win. Indiana was having to win games like 65-58. Defense. The ball was, going to go inside. They're going to do the whole 2-in, 3-out thing. Hey, Malik Renew, here you go. Throw up your janky left-handed hook shot. Maybe Khalil Ware will grab a rebound and dunk it. Like, that's what Indiana basketball felt like. And you knew that if Indiana could make some outside shots, then they were going to win. They were like 7-1 or 6-2 or whatever it was when they shot 38% or better from three. And it was really that simple with Indiana basketball. With this IU football team, though, I know I'm getting a good product, and I didn't feel that way when I watched Indiana basketball. I know that when I watch Indiana football play, I know that Curt Cignetti is going to have the team prepared. There's no doubt in my mind whatsoever. Okay, I know that the offense is going to have a good game plan to attack whatever defense they're playing against, and I know that they're going to figure out ways to score points. And I know that the defense is going to have the proper game plan to stop whoever they're playing against. And I know that the defense is going to put guys in the correct spots to make plays. They are a complete football team. Curt Cignetti appears to be a really good football coach. Now, when they play, Michigan and Ohio State down the line, they'll probably lose just because they aren't as talented as those teams are. But once again, I know that when they play those better teams, they're going to have a chance to win because Curt Cignetti is going to do his job well, and he's going to have his team prepared. Okay, and that's what good coaches do. They have their teams prepared for whoever they're going to play against, and that is what Curt Cignetti has done through the first 4 games this year. He's had his teams prepared on both sides of the football, and once again, I know it's against a bunch of bad football teams. But once again, they've dominated everyone that they've played. And I think that Indiana fans should be excited about the product that they're putting out on the field so far through, the first third of this college football season. IU football headed in the right direction. It's fun. It's exciting. And I hope that this continues. I hope they win Saturday. I hope they improve to 5-0 because Indiana's a state that deserves a legitimately good football team, not the consistent disappointing product that Notre Dame continues to put out there, right? I know we're all tired of they went 11-1. Oh, they're about to play somebody good and they got beat by 3 touchdowns. I know we're tired of that. Purdue fans, sorry, but go get ready for basketball season. You're the worst team in the Big Ten, it appears. Okay, there's nothing exciting about this Purdue football season, but Purdue fans, you can still get excited about college football because there are a ton of good games. Like this Saturday, great slate. 4 games. I'm going to be tuned into 4 games that I think you should tune into as well. And if you don't want to watch college football, then watch the WNBA playoffs. Tony East joining me at 11 o'clock to talk about the Indiana Fever and the Connecticut Sun series, right? But before he joins me here in about 10 minutes, I want to briefly go over some of these college football games that we're going to have on Saturday because it's going to be a great product. And it really starts at noon with Indiana playing Maryland. Okay, because I think that as we sit back and as we watch the Big Ten, we're just kind of waiting, as we get into conference play to figure out like who's really good and who isn't. And I think we're going to get another decent litmus test here of whether or not Indiana football is actually good. I think that they are. I'm excited to watch them play at noon at home. It should be a fun, exciting game to watch, right? And then from there, also at noon, we got Oklahoma State playing Kansas State, 2 teams that could win the Big 12, right? 2 teams that are capable of scoring a ton of points and not playing a lot of defense. So if you want a good old-fashioned Big 12 game, there it is right there. Louisville, 15th ranked team in the country, plays Notre Dame, the 16th ranked team in the country. Louisville doesn't play in the MAC, so I expect for Notre Dame to actually play well. Jeff Brom can coach, as we all know, did a really good job at Purdue, got them to the Big Ten title game not all that long ago, and he's continued to do a good job at Louisville. They were good last year in his first year. They're one of the 15 best teams in the country, apparently. So once again, they seem like they're a pretty good football team. Notre Dame better be ready or they're going to lose. Illinois plays Penn State at night in Happy Valley. That game's going to be fun too because Illinois is once again, a legitimately good football team. Brett Bielema, really good football coach. You know, he's going to have his team prepared and ready to go. They're so much fun. I love watching Illinois play. They got this athletic quarterback. They run the football. They play good defense. I know a couple guys who coach there, so I'm a little biased, but it's a good football team. And Penn State, it's another normal Penn State season. They haven't played anybody, haven't beaten anybody good. Bowling Green almost beat them. All right, this is like their first time playing against a legitimately good football team in Illinois. I hate that game's at 7:30 because the headliner of the week, Georgia playing Alabama, is also at 7:30. Right, this is the game of the week, the game of the century, whatever you want to call it. And look, if you don't like college football, shouldn't matter for this one. You should watch this game anyway. There are going to be NFL guys all over the field. Two of the best coaches in the sport are coaching. It should be a truly, truly great football game. Like it really, really should be. Georgia, Alabama, two powerhouses in the SEC. They've kind of dominated college football over the past decade, really the past 20 years with that awesome Alabama run. So that game should be incredible. Fever and the Sun, they play tonight. Hopefully it's better than game one. Fever lost by 14. I've got Tony East set to join me at 11 o'clock to talk about the series, to talk about Caitlin Clark, to talk about some of the drama. The Indiana Pacers also had, their first kind of big press conference leading into training camp. Tony was there. I'm going to ask him a couple questions about that as well. But either way, I'm super excited to have Tony on. He's set to join me at 11 o'clock. Thanks for tuning into the Real Jonathan Smith Show. I'll be back with Tony East here in a few minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for...
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. We've got more Caitlin Clark basketball tonight as the Indiana Fever are set to take on the Connecticut Sun in Game 2 of their opening round WNBA playoff series. Joining me now, Tony East, writer for the Indiana Fever, also hosts Locked On Pacers during Pacer season. Tony, what's going on, man?
A lot. It's rare that I have overlap of Pacers and Fever going into the Pacers season, but Fever's still alive, so a lot going on in pro basketball land these days.
It's really nice because, I love hoops. I know that you were at Chad Buchanan, the Pacers GM, his press conference yesterday, kind of previewing Pacers training camp, getting ready for the season. Before we talk about the Fever and the Suns Game 2 tonight, what was kind of your biggest takeaway from just anything that he said?
Ironically, my biggest takeaway from journalism side is there was a lot less to talk about than most years, which in some ways is a good thing. In some ways is just a reflection of the summer the Pacers had, right? There's not as many, big roster storylines after the summer, like in years past where we were asking about their new coach, Nate Bjorkgren, or Miles Turner's future, which that came up a little bit, or Buddy Hield wanting an extension, or this player or that player who, something's going on, Victor Oladipo. But this year, it was, they have 13 of the same players from last year. Do they think they can be better? And what does that look like? And how do they keep that chemistry and happiness from last year that was such a superpower into another year? In terms of actual new stuff that mattered for takeaways, Halliburton and Mathurin being healthy going into camp is really important. And I think that the biggest thing in terms of team building that mattered is them saying that they want to keep Miles Turner. They want Miles Turner on the team, and he cannot be extended this season. He will be a free agent next year, and they have some tax concerns they'll have to deal with, right? So it's going to be fascinating to see how they keep him or what that looks like. And I think that what they've said makes it obvious. It's going to be decided on the court. However they play, however Turner plays, however other players play will kind of determine what their next path forward is. And that's kind of what you expect when they have this much continuity, but not as many, giant news items as years past, just given how much is similar from last season.
Fair enough. Hopefully they can hold on to Miles Turner. As you know, I love that guy. Yeah. I think he's really important. But moving on to the Indiana Fever. So I'm very curious. If you had an opportunity to ask Caitlin Clark a question, would you also ask her for the 100th time about her getting hit in the face on Sunday?
She hit someone else in the face during the same game. That is not being talked about. It's crazy, man. It is unbelievable.
So I've kind of reached this point, once again, joined by Tony East, who covers the Indiana Fever and your Indiana Pacers. I've reached this point where, I love Caitlin Clark. She's an incredible basketball player. The product of the WNBA as a whole is good basketball. But I am just very tired of the drama. I feel like everything that happens isn't about the basketball, if that makes sense. Do you feel that way? Yeah. Do you know other people that feel that way? And has that kind of weighed on you throughout the year?
Yeah, sometimes it is about the basketball, which is good. Those stories tend to turn out really well because Caitlin Clark likes to talk about basketball, believe it or not. But, it's just it's so, the second the Carrington play happened in the first quarter, I was like, I'm getting a notification from ESPN in the next 5 minutes, right? And I did. It's so weird how normal things that happen become these giant stories with her. And I found that to be super odd all season. And then it bleeds into press conferences, which is this. We all saw the play. We don't have to ask about this. And I know that this play, you're not asking about just that play, but it's just the perfect summation of how it always goes down with these things. That just, every time she gets a tech, every time she gets knocked to the floor, it's some giant story. And that's both sides about it. I was why? What are we doing? This happens every game, even in games that don't include the Fever. It blows my mind how it goes and what people are interested in about it. And I get why she is one of, if not the most famous athletes in America right now. Yeah. I guess maybe even including the NFL. I'm not sure. So I get why people have that level of interest and all that, but it's crazy that normal sports stuff becomes this just giant story that is asked about so oddly the whole way through.
Yeah, it is weird. Like, even going back to the start of the season when Angel Reese hit her in the face, that story didn't die. Like, I feel like people still talk about it. They don't, but that's just what it feels like. But I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about the actual basketball. So Caitlin Clark obviously struggled in game 1, 4 of 17 from the field, 2 of 13 from 3. Look, I just said I didn't want to talk about her getting hit in the face, but I feel like getting poked in the eye impacts your ability to shoot the ball. I know she said that it didn't matter. It didn't impact her. I kind of feel like it did. Why do you think she struggled so much in game 1?
Yeah, it does. It's weird because she had good looks, right? Like she would create separation a lot in the first half and just could not make them. And it's unusual, but like she's had a few games like that this season. It's not like she shouldn't be grilled for just having an off night. I don't think the Sun were making it hard for her to get open for her own shots necessarily, right? They did a great job shutting down her brilliant passing by like showing her two or switching or whatever it took to make it so she couldn't just whip it to an open shooter or like get Aaliyah Boston the ball with a ton of space. But they didn't do like the best job not letting Caitlin get open from 3. And I think you just nailed it. Like she had a lot of good looks that she just didn't make. Maybe that's because that play she said it wasn't. Whatever. Regardless of why it happened, right? She missed the shots. She was so frustrated. She's banging on the bench in the third quarter after a few misses. And her naturally shooting better will matter a lot in tonight's game. But off nights do happen, and it wasn't just her, right? Like Damaris Dantas hit threes, and I think Kelsey Mitchell hit one. I think not every other Fever player was like awful from 3. Lexi Holmes, both of hers, for example. They just had a really team poor shooting night, which hurt them a lot. And Connecticut's defense is unbelievable; it's the best in the league. So that's not like crazy to me, but I think they got good looks and just a lot of them. That the question is, can they make enough that it matters? Because even if they made 50% of their threes in game 1, they still would have only brought that thing to overtime. They have a lot to work on, and Caitlin's threes are a big part of it, but a lot of it is a lot more than that.
Joined by Tony East, who covers the Indiana Fever and the Indiana Pacers, talking about Sun Fever game 2 tonight at 7:30 on ESPN. So, look, this is my first experience, like I'm assuming it is a lot of people's first experience, with WNBA playoff basketball. And so everything for me, I just kind of look through this NBA lens because that's what I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
The biggest difference between the NBA regular season and postseason is the physicality goes up and there tends to be a little bit more effort on the defensive side of the ball. Is the WNBA similar in that fashion? Or like what is kind of the difference between the regular season and the postseason in terms of like style of play?
I think the physicality switch from WNBA regular season to postseason is actually bigger than the NBA, ironically, right? Becky Hammond was just talking about this before Fever Aces in Indy, like on the record, like just saying, like, yeah, I don't like how much the physicality changes in the postseason, right? And she said sometimes to her makes the game not as good. And I do think I like physicality in the playoffs, especially when the rest like don't call it as much. I kind of think there could be less whistles in both the NBA and the WNBA. But that is a big change, and that's something new for the Fever, right? That's something all young teams have to learn is what that actually looks like, and the Fever are playing like maybe the most physical team anyway. So that is a big adjustment for every team. If you watched Liberty versus Dream last night, like that game had a lot of post-play mattering. Tina Charles and Jonquel were both really good for their team. So that's a big adjustment for a smaller Fever team too, and I think they're learning that as they go. But yeah, I think it's pretty similar to how the game kind of changes in the NBA playoffs. It's just that they're shorter series and less time to have those adjustments and things really matter over the course of a series.
So coming into the series, I didn't feel like the Fever had much of a chance. They're young and experienced. They don't have a ton of depth, and that is not a great combination if you want to win a playoff series, especially when you're playing against a team as good as the Sun. How did you feel about the Fever's chances of winning the series coming into it and now that you've seen the game?
Yeah, amazingly, I thought that they got their worst matchup in the whole league. I was telling people that I would think the Fever would rather have played the Aces than the Sun, which is crazy because the Aces are 2-time reigning champs, have the MVP on their team. But just matchup-wise, like the Sun is hard to get for the Fever. I mean, they were the best defense in the league. I already said that. But even beyond that, before Game 1, they had the best defensive backcourt for Caitlin and Kelsey Mitchell with Ty Harris and Dejanay Carrington. And then Ty Harris gets hurt in game 1, and Veronica Burton comes in and was still awesome defending in those lineups. And they can put DeWanna Bonner on Caitlin Clark to put length on her. Alyssa Thomas is an MVP candidate and all-defense candidate every year. And Bree Jones is one of the best rim protectors in the league. Like, their defense is really good, and they can switch so easily that they have, to me, the best defensive personnel to match up with the Fever, which was, to me, also the only way the Fever would be, like, totally helpless in a playoff series is if they get just shut down, right? Because they were the best offense in the league after the Olympic break. So this series, to me, was, well, the best offense versus the best defense. If those neutralize, how's this going to go? And the Sun are pretty good on offense while the Fever stink on defense. So that's exactly what game 1 looked like, is the Sun got a bunch of stops and their offense was good enough to win. And so because they're playing a team that they match up so poorly against, it's already very good on defense. It's just a really tough matchup for the Fever. The Lynx would have been 2, but if they could have played the Aces, I think they would have had a better chance to win a game. I still think they can win, right? They did beat the Sun late in August. I think we'll talk about that game in a second, I'd imagine. And like some of the stuff from that game did not happen in game 1 of the series that I think they need to get to if they're going to win a game and get this back to Indy. But it's just they drew such a tough matchup for their own abilities, and for them to win that kind of game, they have to impose their style, which is hard to do when you're taking the ball out of the net so much and they can shut you down that easily. So Connecticut's already just straight up good. They made the finals 2 years ago for a reason, but now on top of that ability that they had, they are just matching up so poorly up and down the roster. And yeah, like you said, good depth for Connecticut. So it's a tough series. They can win games in it, right? They have beaten Connecticut before, but they will have to make changes because what they did Sunday night was not even close to good enough.
What are the changes that you think that they need to make? Or is it as simple as they shot, 28% or whatever it was from 3? If they shoot closer to 40, it's probably a better game.
Yeah, that's part of it, right? Make those. And then they took a lot, right? And I don't know about you, but I didn't think they took any that I thought were just awful shots, right? So that's a good thing. That means you're creating the threes. But to me, like when they beat Connecticut in August, Aaliyah Boston had 8 assists. And I don't think they need to feed her and let her pass. But if they're going to have the setup where Aaliyah Boston sets the screen, then there's 2 defenders on Caitlin Clark or Kelsey Mitchell, whoever the ball handler is, or they're just, a scram and then they rotate back to Boston. That means there's a 4-on-3 somewhere else on the court. And so in that game, the Fever won. Aaliyah Boston would catch at the elbow. She'd assess that 4-on-3 and she made good plays. She either made a shot or she passed it to an open shooter, a cutter, whatever that was. And that's hard to do. 1, it's hard to get that pass, when you're double teamed to the big. And 2, it's hard to play quickly through your big, but Aaliyah's gotten better at that short roll stuff. So that's one thing is if they can get those 4-on-3 chances, they've got to execute them really well and convert. And Aaliyah did that when they beat Connecticut during the regular season. The other thing is if Sun are going to switch a ton or they're just going to put a bunch of ball pressure up high, do a bunch of actions with Caitlin and Kelsey Mitchell together, like them screening for each other. Make the defense start to rotate before you get into your set if you're the Fever, because that's a good way to make it so those 4-on-3s are scrambled or jumbled, or even if the switch doesn't happen, and that's how you can create advantages that way. They studied the Warriors with Steph and Clay to figure out how to get those 2 kind of in sync together. They talked about that during the season. I think they need to lean more on that and maybe play a little bit more than Alexis Smith. I thought only 9 minutes was, I guess I get it because either speed to beat Connecticut, but I thought they should have leaned more on her as well. So that's the 3 things. I thought defensively their scheme was fine, but execution wasn't very good. Their closeouts weren't very sharp. They talked about that after the game. So that's a little more low-hanging fruit kind of stuff on that end. And if Marina Mabry doesn't get hot, I bet they give up 82, 83-ish, and they can win if they give up that much. But they've got to kind of change their approach to offense and play the way they did in late August. They didn't have to do that at all in game 1. But they know how, right? They've done it before, and their offense has been awesome for stretches of the season. So I'm not writing them off yet, but that's a lot of adjustments to make in one game against a battle-tested Sun team.
It really is. And joined by Tony East, who covers both the Pacers and the Fever. And I felt like there was all this, I guess, false hope for the Fever to win this series because Dave Portnoy came out and he was like, I bet $100,000 on the Fever to win the WNBA Finals. And I was like, you're going to lose $100,000, Dave.
Yeah, that was dumb.
And really. And so there's all of this kind of fake excitement. I felt like coming into the series, if the Fever win a game, then that's great, right? Because for so many of these players, it's their first time playing in the playoffs. What did you kind of feel like coming into the series was a fair outcome? If the Fever got swept, I would be, if they do get swept, I'll be surprised just because they're so good offensively. Like, should this Fever, like, should they win a game? Should they win 2? Like, how do you kind of feel about that?
Yeah, they went 1-3 against the Sun in the regular season, right? So it's the best of 3 set. It's totally possible to get swept, and it's just such as life in the short first round of the W. I told a few people I thought it would either be 2-0 or 2-1 Connecticut, with game 1 being the most important one, obviously, for that kind of thing. And now I think it's probably going to be 2-0 if you made me predict right now. But again, it's sort of like the Pacers, not as much, because the Pacers were the best offense the entire season, not just for like one pocket of the season they just had. But like when the Fever were clicking late last year, they could, or late in the year they just had, like they could beat anybody, right? They did. They beat everybody but the Aces, and if they made their free throws in game 2 against the Aces, they would have beat them too. Like they can beat anybody, right? And so that matters at some point where I can't even write them off that the series is over. They could just come out tonight, like you said, shoot better from 3, a small tweak or 2 on defense. Mabry's not so hot, and everything else goes exactly the same from game 1, and they win that way, right? That's like not even that many adjustments. That's totally possible to me, right? It's also possible that the Sun are just better and are way better on defense, and this game starts very similarly where the Fever are maybe keeping up a little bit, but then the Sun make just like one halftime tweak and boom, they're off and running. That's totally possible to me too. And because they're already down, I kind of feel like it's going to be pretty close. It's going to be pretty tough for them to come back and get this done. But maybe they can get it back to Indiana, right? Get the home fans, give themselves a chance. But I just think it's too tough stylistically, and that's why I predicted before the series they would not win it. Even though I get why people were riding high the Fever. They played great after the Olympic break, but man, they shot unbelievably hot from deep in those games. Like if they just stayed down in the playoffs, sure, they can beat anybody, but I didn't expect that they would, and they certainly didn't in the first game.
They most definitely did not. Outside of the Fever and Sun series, which team has impressed you the most?
Oh man, the Aces look good. I mean, they just walloped the Storm, not walloped, but they handled the Storm pretty well, and they started to play good defense down the stretch of the regular season, which was what was holding them back this season from being the champion level team they were the last 2 years. Is their offense was fine, but their defense was really struggling. If their defense is ratcheted up and they can handle the Storm at that level, man, that Liberty series, last year's finals rematch, is going to be spectacular. And I think the Aces can win it. They have the MVP, obviously, but they've really impressed me. Liberty played fine. They swept the Dream as they should, but kind of struggled in that second game until the fourth quarter. Nothing really stood out in the Lynx Mercury game. And honestly, the Lynx didn't look that great. So the most impressive teams to me have been the team that Fever are playing, Connecticut and the Aces. And that was the 2022 finals. It'd be fun to see it again. They're both really good.
It would be. I thought the Liberty looked good last night. Sabrina went
nuts. The second half, yeah, they looked really good in the second half. Sabrina took it up. And Fevich, yeah, see, look at this, Jonathan. Fevich got hit in the face on that layup. Nobody asked her about it.
Yeah, it's just the whole season. Oh man, love Caitlin. People obviously do. They had, over 1 million viewers for game 1 and all that kind of stuff. But man, I'm with you, man. Like, let's just, I don't know. Does it bother you that the first round's best two out of 3?
They've had it that way for a while. Not really. Just given what their season timeline is, and a lot of stuff about the W people don't realize. Like for some of these players, it's not even their primary source of income. Like they go play overseas in Europe and make more. So the calendar of their season has mattered a great deal for a long time, and so they have to fit in games into a certain window. Plus, they didn't have charter travel before, so it's hard to do longer series, especially because they don't do conferences, right? So pretend the first round is Connecticut versus Seattle. Like that's a ton of travel to get from place to place. So now that they have charter, maybe they can make some tweaks to the 2 home games, 1 home game format. But I bet the first round stays best of 3. Maybe next year, maybe even beyond that a little bit, and then they do the best of 5s after that. But it's fine. I think the NBA playoffs should not be best of 7 in the first round too. I think they should shorten that. So we don't need to see the 1 seed versus the 8 seed for 7 games in the NBA. So I'm good. I'm good with best of 3, maybe best of 5 one day if they can get salaries up enough that the players are just playing in the W year round. But for now, I think it's fine as it is. Yeah.
Last question for you, Tony, and I'll let you go. Joined by Tony East, who covers both the Indiana Pacers and the Indiana Fever. Busy guy right now. So you may not have the answer to this, but it's something that I've just been trying to figure out. Why does women's basketball in Europe work better than it does here in America?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
That's a good question. Culturally, I think it's just more popular there and always has been, right? And those even like tons of players go to Australia and all over the place. But now it's finally hitting you've seen it. The popularity here is immense now, especially for the local team, the Fever. Yeah, I can't really answer that. I think it's just kind of a cultural, structural deal where they get a lot of fans and people really liked it there, and that wasn't necessarily the case for the WNBA till at least the last 5-ish years, maybe even a little less than that. So I don't have a great answer, but that's my hunch.
Okay, fair enough. Tony, thanks for your time, man. Do you have the Fever winning or losing tonight?
I think it's much closer tonight, but I think the Sun are going to pull it out.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. Tony, thanks for your time, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
See ya. That is Tony East. You can follow him on Twitter at Tony R. East. Great guy. Knows his stuff. Covers the Fever really well. Covers the Pacers incredibly well as well. Said well a lot there. Let me maybe chill out with that word. He's a good guest. There it is. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, I've got thoughts on Caitlin Clark, the WNBA, NIL, so many thoughts to get to when we come back here in 4 minutes.
The best takes, stories, and entertainment. It's The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to tune in live every day from 10 to noon. We're right here on Indy Sports Ticket. Head over to YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's called Indy Sports Ticket, believe it or not. You can also download the Indy Sports Ticket app. You can stream my show and the Dan Dockett Show there. Dan Dockett Show running from noon to 3 every single day. You can also watch the show on Twitter as well. We're everywhere. There's no excuse not to listen. So thank you for listening. Tonight, the Indiana Fever have their second game against the Connecticut Sun. Game 2 happening tonight, 7:30. You can watch that game live on ESPN. And I got to be honest, I've just kind of reached this point to where I just like, I'm kind of done with the WNBA. Just like the way that it has been covered all year long has just been terrible. No other way around it. Okay, like it hasn't been about basketball at all. It's been about the same thing all year. Caitlin Clark and the drama that she doesn't want any part of that is surrounding her. And I know that people love her and you have to play the hits and you have to write about and talk about what other people are talking about. But I just can't stand any more of this WNBA drama. I was doing my prep last night, knew I'd be talking about the Fever and the Sun game. And I was looking for audio because I like to play audio about, the game and like Chrissy Sides. Did she say anything about adjustments? What about Aaliyah Boston? Did Caitlin say anything interesting? Did anyone for the Sun say anything interesting? And all I found that people were at least interested in was Caitlin Clark getting hit in the face game 1. Even though she was asked about it after the game, she made it pretty clear that she didn't think that it was intentional, but people don't care about that. They had to ask Dejanay Carrington, the lady who hit Caitlin Clark in the face. They had to ask her about it. And here's that conversation.
Dejanay, did you, when you went and kind of swatted at Caitlin, did you intend to hit her in the eye? And if so, could you just, or if not, either way, could you talk about what happened on that play?
I don't even know why I would intend to hit anybody in the eye. That doesn't even make sense to me. But no, I didn't. I didn't know I hit her, actually. I was trying to make a play on the ball, and I guess I followed through and I hit her. So obviously it's never intentional. That's not even like the type of player that I am. So yeah.
Did you and Marina kind of laugh about it afterwards? It looked like there was later on in the game they caught you guys laughing about it.
No, I just told you I didn't even know I hit her. So I can't laugh about something I didn't know happened.
What a stupid question. And this is what it's been all year long. Like that's all that the WNBA coverage has been, and it's worn on me, and I don't like it. I get it. Over 1 million people tuned in to watch game 1, so people are still eating it up. But I feel like all the coverage from game 1 has been about her getting hit in the face, and that's it. And my issue with all this Caitlin Clark and WNBA coverage is that it's not about the sport, and it hasn't been all year. It's all about the drama, and I hate drama. Okay? When things outside of sports get involved with sports, they just become so much less enjoyable. Like I like coming on the air and saying that the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to win the AFC South, even if I'm wrong. I like coming on the air and saying that the San Francisco 49ers are going to miss the playoffs because they're going to be hurt all year, even if I'm wrong, right? Because that to me, that is a sports conversation. But talking about Caitlin Clark getting hit in the face 3 days after it happened isn't a sports conversation, right? And when things outside of the sport, political things especially, get involved, it turns people away. When the NBA decided to put BLM on the court, very political thing, it turned people off to the sport and people quit watching. And I guess this speaks to just the size and notability of Caitlin Clark, that all these political undertows haven't pulled people away from watching the WNBA. But yeah, I just wish the coverage was more about basketball. right? When that happens, I'll buy into the WNBA because some of those women can really play. But as of right now, it's not about that. It's about a bunch of other crap. And I'm kind of done with it because when sports become about something outside of the sport, it makes it less enjoyable. And NIL is doing that to college sports. NIL is making college sports less enjoyable. Okay, my brother and I were wanting to watch the Arkansas Razorbacks play football in every SEC stadium. Okay, it's a slow process. We're young, we're broke. We've been to 2 games so far in the past 3 years. We went to Tuscaloosa in November of 2021 to watch Arkansas play Alabama. This previous Saturday, we went to Auburn to watch Arkansas play Auburn. Had a blast at both. Okay, long car rides, long conversations, catching up on what else going on in each other's lives and all those things. But at the games themselves, there was a glaring difference between the two that made the Alabama game more enjoyable. And it was the difference in the NIL. NIL, the way it was viewed, the way it was talked about in November of 2021 was incredibly different than the way that we talk about it now. NIL was legalized in June of 2021. So in November, we still had people out there naive enough to think that this NIL stuff wouldn't turn it into pay to play like it is now. And at the Alabama game, every mistake that was made, every good thing that happened, the discourse was really about the players, right? It was like, oh, this guy went to high school 30 minutes from here, grew up an Alabama fan, showed up, wasn't very good, stayed, developed. Now he's going to be, a 3rd-round pick in the NFL draft. Okay, it was very much about the players and about the team as a whole, as we, sat in the sea of crimson around us and listened to people talk about their Alabama football team in 2021. Then Saturday, we go to the Auburn game. Had a blast. Okay, Arkansas won, so you're hearing all these upset fans. Alabama didn't play on Saturday, so there were Alabama fans at the Auburn game rooting for Arkansas. It was really funny. The Alabama fans there were arguably the best part. But at the Auburn game, there was no discussion about the team as a whole. There was no conversation around us about players improving and players getting better. None of that happened. None of it. All of the conversations at the Auburn game that I heard were about how they paid this player this much money to transfer from this school, and he's not very good. All right, it was all about NIL. That was what every single conversation was about. And this NIL stuff, it's just in the process of ruining college sports. NIL is not a bad thing. They just need to change it and kind of rein it in a little bit. And as I sat in the crowd on Saturday and I listened to the fans around me, it became more and more evident that there needs to be some sort of restriction. Because once again, none of the comments were about the game. It was all about NIL. You're hearing people say things like we paid that guy $100,000 to transfer in from Louisiana Tech and he can't catch that pass? Really? Why am I giving to the collective if this is the product we're going to put on the field? Dan talked about it on his show yesterday. Why are you giving to IU's collective for them to not make the tournament? Okay, and all this NIL stuff is just slowly making the sport worse. It's becoming less and less about the coaches and their ability to recruit and their ability to develop players, while it's becoming more and more about how rich is your alumni. That's really the truth of the matter. Whichever school has rich alumni that are invested in college football, those are the teams that are going to win. Okay, and look, successful college teams in any sport shouldn't be successful because some rich alumni came in and bought them a new football team. Successful college teams in any sport should be successful because the coaches went out, recruited their butts off, and then developed players. Okay, it is really, this NIL stuff is really just taking the joy out of college sports. Non-Power 4 schools and football have just become glorified JUCOs. Okay, if Ball State goes out and they sign a kid from Center Grove or wherever, right, and they develop him over the course of 3 years, right, in his junior year, he's awesome and he's a great football player. And then all of a sudden, Alabama's like, hey, man, we'll pay you 3 times as much as what they're paying you to come play for us. And they can do that because they have more money. It's turning these smaller schools into these glorified JUCOs because these bigger, richer schools can just swoop in and take players because they have more money. I have sat back this year and I've watched the drama in the WNBA kind of ruin the enjoyment of watching those players. And I feel like I'm slowly witnessing NIL do the same thing to college sports. And I wake up this morning and all these feelings that I had about NIL were just confirmed. Because Matthew Sluka at UNLV, starting quarterback, 3-0, UNLV ranked 23rd in the country. He's transferring because of some NIL issues. And there's, 3 different sets of rumors going around about Matthew Sluka and why he's leaving. Okay, the biggest one is that another school came in, offered him money to transfer. Okay, and so he's going to redshirt himself and then transfer. There's another rumor going around that says that he demanded more NIL money and UNLV said no. And then the final rumor that's going around is that Sluka, he said this himself, he said that he wasn't paid what he was promised. I have an incredibly hard time believing that because I know people that know Barry Odom, and everything I've heard about Barry Odom is that he's a stand-up guy, and I find it very hard to believe that he wouldn't follow through on his promise. Either way, no matter which one of these 3 stories is true, it tells you a lot about where college sports are right now. Okay, college sports used to be awesome because they used to be about the team. That's what it used to be about. IU, from my understanding, doesn't have names on the back of their basketball jerseys because it's not about the name on the back. It's about the name on the front. And that used to be something that was embodied around college football as a whole. And that just isn't the case anymore. The introduction of NIL has just made college sports incredibly individualistic. And we already have that in the NFL. Part of why people don't like the NFL and professional sports is because it's about money. If they don't like it, how CeeDee Lamb sat out of training camp because he wanted, $35 million a year. They don't like that Brandon Ayuk did that. Okay, the money stuff turns people away. And I feel like that's where we're headed with NIL. Last thing here on Matthew Sluka before I go to break. He's only completing 44% of his passes on the year, and this dude wants more money. This dude shouldn't be paid anything if he's only completing 44% of his passes. Come on, man. If he was Heisman candidate or something like that, then okay, sure, you want more money. I get it. But, dude, you're completing 44% of your passes. Come on now. There's no way. There's no way. Anyway, NIL slowly ruining college sports. Sucks. It's not fun, but that is what's happening. Anthony Richardson doing his best not to ruin the Indianapolis Colts season. I've got some thoughts of what he needs to do on Sunday for the Colts to pull out a win against what is the best defense in the NFL. I've got those thoughts for you when we come back here in 4 minutes.
Unadulterated sports talk with unfiltered takes. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Tickets, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in today. Greatly appreciate it, whether that's on 1430, just driving around Indianapolis, tuning in to 1430 AM. Maybe you're watching on YouTube, head over there, Indy's Sports Ticket. You can join the chat to be part of the conversation. It's a great time in the YouTube chat. You can also watch live on Twitter. Follow us there at Ticket 1430 if you want to check that out. Yeah. Moving on here. Indianapolis Colts take on the Steelers on Sunday. And I got a terrible feeling. Just the worst feeling. Anthony Richardson, young quarterback. It's going to be ugly. This is probably going to be the worst game we see Anthony Richardson play all year because they're playing against the best defense in the NFL. And as I continue to think just out towards Sunday in that Colts game, I keep remembering my childhood. So I grew up Miami Dolphins fan. And whenever they would draft a new quarterback, and I knew that they were going to play the rookie, whether it was Ryan Tannehill, even when they drafted Tua a few years ago, there were two games that I was not looking forward to. And it was always the two games against the New England Patriots because Bill Belichick and those Patriot defenses ate rookie quarterbacks alive. And that is how I feel about this game as well. The Pittsburgh Steelers defense is going to eat Anthony Richardson alive on Sunday. And that's not, a slight towards Anthony Richardson because once again, this is the best defense in the NFL. Okay, they're going to eat, this Steelers defense is going to tear a ton of quarterbacks up this year. Okay, they haven't given up more than 10 points in a game so far through 3 games. They held Kirk Cousins and Justin Herbert, quarterbacks who have had plenty of success in the NFL. They held Kirk Cousins to under 200 yards passing, and they made him throw 2 interceptions. Justin Herbert didn't surpass 200 yards passing either. They have just really limited the offenses that they've played. And the one rookie quarterback that the Steelers have faced was Bo Nix and the Broncos. They held them to 6 points. Bo Nix, he threw for 240 yards, but he also threw 2 interceptions. Anthony Richardson is going to struggle mightily on Sunday. He's probably going to turn the ball over. He's probably only going to complete around 50% of his passes. There probably won't be as many big explosive plays with Minkah Fitzpatrick, one of the best safeties in the NFL, playing safety on the back end. This is lining up to be a brutal experience for Colts fans watching this game. But there is an interesting aspect of the game that I'm interested to see. He hasn't had to deal with a ton of pressure. Anthony Richardson. He's only been sacked 4 times this year in 3 games. It's pretty good. The offensive line that the Colts have has done an excellent job throughout the year, not only in creating running lanes for Jonathan Taylor, but also in just keeping guys off of Anthony Richardson, keeping him clean. And through 3 games, I think that the Colts have one of the better offensive lines in the NFL. But with that being said, as good as this Colts offensive line is, they're going to have their hands full this week because this Pittsburgh Steelers defensive line is amongst the best in the NFL. It is the best in defense in the NFL, and TJ Watt is a large reason for that. And he already has 3 sacks on the year. And the Steelers are averaging 3 sacks a game. They are going to put pressure on Anthony Richardson this week, likely while only rushing 4 guys. Okay, and I'm so intrigued to see how Anthony Richardson responds to that. Okay, because it feels like there is this intense commitment to staying in the pocket and trying to win from the pocket, right? Because that is where Anthony Richardson has to develop. Okay, he's a guy who we all know can run and do really cool things in the open field. But at the same time, that's not how you win in the NFL with quarterbacks. They have to be able to stand in the pocket and throw the ball on time and on target. And it feels like there's this emphasis for Anthony Richardson this year to really work on that. But This is the Steelers defense that's going to push him out of the pocket. And I'm interested to see how Anthony Richardson responds because I think, as crazy as this may sound, I think this may actually help him and this Colts offense. It's going to be incredibly difficult for him to drop back and win this game from the pocket. But he's a guy that if he scrambles a little bit, he can wreak some havoc on defense, as we all know, right? Like he's a guy that on 3rd and 7 can go pick it up with his legs, right? Big Anthony Richardson scrambles are something that I'm going to be looking for this week, not only because it's going to help the Colts move the ball, and I think that he's going to have to run a little bit in order for them to win, but I think it may help him establish some rhythm in terms of his passing ability, right? Because offense, really in every sport, baseball, basketball, football, offense is about rhythm. And rhythm comes just from good things happening. Okay, like it's amazing. Like you watch a baseball game and a guy, hits one off the handle, bat breaks, but it bloops into the outfield, and then you look up, and the next thing you know, he's hitting 500 over his last 4 games. Because just when anything good happens, it helps you find a rhythm. And I'm hopeful that Anthony Richardson gets to scramble a little bit, and those scrambles lead to him having some rhythm in terms of his ability to not only run the football, but also to throw it. His ability to scramble this week is going to be an important aspect of the Colts offense. Okay, and I'm so intrigued to see how he looks this week against the best defense in the NFL. I think it's going to be ugly, but I don't know. I'm holding out a little bit of hope because, as we all know, Anthony Richardson is pretty up and down. And while I'm thinking about Anthony Richardson, I'm honestly trying to figure out whether or not this Colts team's good. There's plenty of evidence that tells me that they aren't, right? They lose to Malik Willis and the Packers. Richardson up and down. Defense hasn't been great outside of the game against the Bears. Like, all this stuff points to them being bad. But then I look at the pass rush. I'm like, pass rush is pretty good. I look at the offensive line. I'm like, they've been pretty good. And then I look at the numbers. And if you look at the AFC South numbers, the Colts look great. The Colts have scored more points than any other team in the AFC South. And they have allowed the least amount of points of teams in the AFC South. Colts just have to figure out a way to put it together. Okay, like they lose their first game to the Texans because the defense gave up 29 points, even though the offense scored 27. And then they lose to the Packers because, despite the terrible run defense that the Colts displayed, they only gave up 16 points. The offense just couldn't figure out how to put it in the end zone. They only scored 10. And then finally against the Bears, they kind of bridge the gap. The defense plays great. The offense gets rolling late. They figure out a way to score 21 points, and they win an ugly game against the Bears. And that is going to be the formula once again when they play the Steelers. Okay, like if they're going to beat the Steelers, they're going to have to win ugly. And look, the issue with that is the Steelers also want to win ugly, right? Because I don't think that they fully trust Justin Fields. But for the Colts, this is going to be another Jonathan Taylor heavy game. They're going to try to avoid having Anthony Richardson throw the ball 30 times. I think they're going to lean on the defense a bit against a quarterback in Justin Fields that hasn't exactly had an illustrious career. I think the Colts are looking to try to win this game 20-13. And that is a realistic outcome for the Colts on Sunday if they were to win. Because the Steelers offense isn't very good. It's not. They only average 17 points a game. That is 24th in the NFL. It's not very good. They average less than 300 yards of total offense a game. That's not very good. They only average 4.6 yards per play, which means they don't consistently move the football and they don't create explosive plays. That 4.6 yards per play, that's 28th in the NFL. Their red zone touchdown percentage. So how often when they get in the red zone are they scoring touchdowns? Only 25% of the time. That is 31st in the NFL. They are a bad offensive team. This is a game that the Colts defense should perform well in. Okay, the Steelers want to win this game off of their defense. The Colts can find a way to avoid turnovers, which is going to be tough given what we've seen from Anthony Richardson so far this year. They can find a way to avoid the turnovers. They can figure out a way to run the football, which is going to be difficult because the Steelers are holding their opponents to only 73 rushing yards a game, which is the second best in the NFL. So they can figure out how to run it. If they can avoid turning the football over, then they can win this game. Like, they legitimately can. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be no fun to watch. It's going to be like watching the Colts play the Bears last week, where we're sitting there and we're watching and we're just like, how did the Colts win this? Like that, if the Colts win Sunday, I think that is going to be the feeling, and I hope they do. I'm not going to say that they need to, even though 2-2 sounds way better than 1-3. Even though if the Colts do start 1-3, they can still make the playoffs. Their schedule, it's not that gruesome, and this division is awful. Okay? Anthony Richardson, Justin Fields, a matchup of the two most athletic quarterbacks. Actually, that might be hyperbole because you got to remember Lamar Jackson. A matchup of two of the most athletic quarterbacks in the NFL. How's that? All right? It's going to be interesting. I'm not a Justin Fields believer. The Steelers offense hasn't been very good this year. He doesn't throw the ball over the middle of the field if you look at his passing charts, and that seems to be a pretty glaring hole. I think that you need quarterbacks that can throw the ball over every part of the field. So I'm very intrigued by this game Sunday. It feels like a game the Colts should lose. They're 1.5-point underdogs. But at the same time, it also feels winnable because I just don't have a ton of faith in that Pittsburgh Steelers offense. I just don't think that, Justin Fields, Najee Harris, and George Pickens is enough firepower to separate from teams, right? And in close games, weird things happen. So looking forward to Sunday, looking forward to how Anthony Richardson performs against the best defense in the NFL. And I'm looking forward to tomorrow because I've got another great show in store for you from 10 to noon. Make sure you're tuned in, whether that's on 14:30 a.m. Maybe you're listening via the Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you get your apps. Or you can watch on YouTube. Indy Sports Ticket, head over there and subscribe to the channel. The Dan Dockett Show is coming your way here in about 4.5 minutes. I will talk to you tomorrow starting at 10.